Okay, today what we're going to do is your assignment for today is to actually start doing some serious work with lighting. Now, you guys know how to put backgrounds in. I'm not going to put a background into the scene, but I do want to try to experiment, and I'm going to ask you guys to put a background on your scene that has kind of interesting lighting, and then you're going to try to match up the lighting on your figure so that it matches the lighting in the scene, so it fits in. Now, I've got a dinosaur here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to close down figures. You see over here where it says contents, I'm going to close down the figures. I'm going to go into poses. If it's not expanded, you click the little arrow and expose it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag down, and this is an Allosaurus. I'm just going to pick a nice Allosaurus pose. You can look at mats, by the way. You can sometimes come up with interesting looking textures and colors. That's what I'm doing here. Um, that's okay. The mat is simply just a bunch of pictures that are wrapped around the mesh that makes up this figure. Now I'm going to go to Allosaurus poses, and I saw kind of an interesting pose here. This is one where the guy is kind of like staring off into the side, right? He's kind of hopping up and down on one foot. I'm going to turn it around so we got him kind of sort of from the side, kind of staring at us from the side, like he suddenly realized we're there. Okay, so there's my little dinosaur. Now, what I want to do, and it's very important that you be aware, and you should have your parameters dials open here. You do know that you can move your guy around. Like, for instance, X translate moves him back and forth. Y translate, I believe, moves him up and down. Okay, Z translate moves him forward. You notice that he's actually below the mesh, okay, on the floor. That's okay as long as you don't put anything down there. All right. And you can also rotate them into different ways too. And you obviously by this point know how to do all of these things. Here's what we're going to do now though. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to be putting in lighting. So the first thing I want to do is I want to delete all the lights. Now, that doesn't show up now. It would show up if we went to try to render it. It would come in all black because there are no lights. We've had this experience before in TrueSpace where I told you to delete the lights. The reason I want you to do this is you get very interesting shadows when you have a single point source of light that casts shadows. One of the things with DAZ Studio and some of these other products is different from TrueSpace. All lights cause shadows. Okay, so that's something to be aware of. So we're going to go over to the Create tab, and I'm going to drag to... Now you have a couple of different options. You have a point light. A point light sends lights out in all directions. A distant light is going to light up the entire scene pretty much equally without very much in the way of shadows. We're looking for a spotlight. Okay, so I'm going to put in a new spotlight. And what it's going to do, right now the default, because there is no light, it's just kind of generally putting light into the scene. Watch what happens when I finally say, okay, I'm going to actually put a spotlight in. And I'm going to apply all the default settings. I'm going to keep all that. That's okay. I'm going to accept. And when I close it down, boom, everything goes pitch black. Because now that there's a light in there, all it's doing is going to show you what that light does. And as you can see, that spotlight is down here on the floor, which is below the Allosaurus, so you don't see anything. So the first thing we need to do is we need to take the y-axis and we need to translate it up. And you see how it's flying up there? Okay. And one of the things you notice is it's still not doing a very good job of lighting up our Allosaurus, and there's a very simple reason for that. This is a very, very narrow spotlight, and it may actually not be on the Allosaurus. So there's a couple of things I can do to fix that. The first thing I could do is you notice where it says illumination intensity. I can jack up the intensity, but again, because it's a narrow light, because it's not very wide, it's not going to light up the Allosaurus. I can also play with a spread angle. Widen out the angle. And you notice now just it's catching a little bit of the tail. Well, that's not very good. I'm going to bring the spread angle down to about, say, 60%. But what I am going to do, I want this to point at the Allosaurus's head. So where you go up to the parameter guides and you see it says visible, and visible will, if you make it invisible, you won't actually be able to see the light in the scene, which is not very helpful. Selectable, yes, I want to select it. Point at, I want to point at, I'm going to click at, right now it's pointing at none. I want it to point at the Allosaurus's head. Now, if the Allosaurus, all it says is Allosaurus and there's a little plus sign, you click the plus and that expands things. And you may have to keep actually expand everything individually. So I'm going to have it says abdomen, chest. You have to kind of keep on heading until you get to the head. And I'm going to have it point right down here, click on the head, and I'm going to say accept, and that's what it's going to point at. Now you notice, if you look very carefully, you can see how, the head is kind of like slightly lit. Now, look what happens when I play around with the spread angle. It lights up more of the guy. Now, one of the other things, and this is something you guys have already experienced, is play around with the translation. Like the Y translate made it higher. What happens if I move it forward with the X translation? You see how it's kind of light? Now it's pointing from a different angle, and you're getting it? I would actually, let's go Z translate, bring it forward a little bit, and see what that does. Okay, so now see how it kind of looks like he's kind of coming out of the shade? That's what I wanted to do. That's the experiment, what I want you to do. I want you to create some scenes where you do some really dramatic lighting with your dinosaurs. I want at least 3 or 4 different images, okay? And I want you to post that to the forum. There's a forum right below that says dinosaur lighting, and I want you to experiment with that. You do not need to do dinosaurs. I noticed a couple of guys have been playing around with the Desert Warriors, the Desert Army figures. If you guys want to do that, you can do that as well. But I do want you to experiment a little bit with lighting now, okay? And I'd like at least 3 images because I am going to start. Okay, remember how I told you I was giving you a little vacation? Vacation's over. I'm actually going to start grading some things. All right, we have about 2 weeks of working on various things for grades, and then we're actually, believe it or not, going to have to start the final. All right, so we do need to get some stuff. I do need to get some grades in because second quarter is unbelievably short before we have to start working on the final. Okay, so make good use of this time, and I will see you guys tomorrow.